Title: The Swallowed Star. Chapter 1. Awakening in Ruins. The wind howled through the shattered skyline of Jiangnan City, dragging dust and silence across the broken streets. Towers that once kissed the clouds were now hollowed ruins, their skeletal frames jutting into the ash-colored sky. In the shadow of a collapsed high-rise, a figure crouched silently, one hand braced on the cracked pavement, the other clutching a makeshift spear. Luo Jian's breath came shallow and steady. His eyes, sharp with focus, scanned the debris-strewn street ahead. It was early morning, the safest hour to scavenge, before the mutated beasts awakened in full hunger, before rival scavengers came crawling like hyenas. He was 17, lean but wiry, with tattered urban camo clinging to his frame. His boots were hand-stitched, the soles barely holding, yet his grip on the spear was steady, calm, trained. 10 seconds, he whispered, gaze locked on a distant, hulking silhouette. Then it turns. The beast, a scaled hound-like mutant with twin spines curling from its back, sniffed the air and paced, its hide rippling with tension. Luo Jian waited, body coiled like a spring. Then the creature turned. A flash. He darted forward, closing the distance with silent speed. The spear lunged, plunging beneath the ribcage. The creature screamed a wet, curdled sound and toppled. Luo Jian rolled back, spear bloody. "That's dinner," he muttered, dragging the carcass toward an alley. Jiangnan was a world of ruins. After the Great Cataclysm 70 years ago, mutated beasts, nanite storms, and shattered governments left humanity scattered into mega-cities. Luo Jian was born in the fringe sector of Zone 3, where power flickered and food was currency. Back in the underground shelter that doubled as his home, Luo Jian knelt before his younger brother, Luo Wei, who was only 8. Thin, coughing, but smiling faintly. "You killed another one." Wei's eyes lit up. "Is only a pup," Luo Jian said, patting his head. "But big enough to make soup. You'll feel stronger tomorrow." Their mother, Mei Yun, stirred the meat into a pot over electric coils. Her eyes were tired. "You shouldn't keep going alone." "I don't have a choice," he said simply. Later that night, after his family was fed, Luo Jian stepped outside to the rooftop of their broken bunker. From there, the jagged skyline looked like a graveyard of steel. He sat cross-legged and closed his eyes. The breathing technique his grandfather had taught him, slow, deliberate cycles, centered his thoughts. While others paid to learn martial arts in government schools, Luo Jian had inherited an ancient scroll, Heaven-Swallowing Manual, a relic from a long-forgotten clan. He pressed 2 fingers to his chest. A warmth spiraled inside, chi barely perceptible but growing. He could feel it now, something awakening. Suddenly, a flash lit the sky. A meteor. No, it was burning, descending, leaving a blue trail. Luo Jian's eyes widened. It crashed beyond the outer ruins. The ground trembled faintly. "A meteorite?" he murmured. "Or something else?" And far away, in a high tower guarded by drones and soldiers, a general stood before monitors displaying the impact site. "Dispatch a research unit. Now." The hunt for power had begun. Chapter 2. Training Grounds of Steel. The sky above Jiangnan Base City rumbled faintly with the passing of an aerial scout ship, a silver blur cutting across the hazy clouds. Below, among the training districts of Sector 9, the clang of metal, the bark of instructors, and the low hum of simulation barriers formed the symphony of the morning. Luo Jian stood motionless in a narrow courtyard, facing a row of combat dummies. He was soaked in sweat, shirt plastered to his back. His knuckles bled, cracked and raw, but he didn't stop. With a deep exhale, he launched forward. His movements were sharp, methodical, each strike flowing into the next. A left hook turned into a spinning back elbow, which then flowed into a knee strike. Combat patterns drilled for weeks, repeated with brutal precision. Yet, even as he moved, frustration clung to his breath. "Again," he growled to himself, resetting his stance. From the training balcony above, Instructor Han Min watched with a calculating eye. The older man, once a Grade B warrior during the Eastern Reclamation Wars, saw something in Luo Jian that others had overlooked. Resolve forged not in privilege, but survival. "He trains like a man possessed," murmured Han Min. Beside him stood Yuan Tao, a senior cadet with an air of smug confidence. "He's desperate, that's all. Talent speaks louder than effort." Han Min said nothing. Meanwhile, Luo Jian finally collapsed to one knee, breath ragged. His vision spun, but his grip on focus remained steady. In his hand, a blade of training alloy shimmered faintly with kinetic energy. Beneath the academy, within the archives of Sector 9, Luo Jian had discovered a damaged copy of the Flickering Star Manual, an ancient martial technique rumored to trace back to the First Awakening epoch. Its principles were foreign to modern power systems: speed beyond sight, movement through voids of perception. The technique was incomplete and its cultivation dangerous, but for Luo Jian, danger was the price of survival. That night, as the cadets slept, Luo Jian ventured deep into the simulation caverns beneath the academy. Each level simulated higher tiers of battle pressure, augmented by gravity fields and AI opponents. In Chamber 4C, he faced a 6-armed synthetic warrior, its attacks relentless. Sparks flew as their blades met, but Luo Jian, moving with increasingly erratic speed, began to slip through its guard. A misstep. The synthetic's blade cut across his side, sending him tumbling. Pain exploded, but in it, clarity bloomed. He felt it, a flicker of the void. The next strike, he vanished. A breath later, he reappeared behind the synthetic and brought his blade down. The construct fell. Panting, half-conscious, Luo Jian whispered, "Flickering star." I felt it. Outside the chamber, hidden behind surveillance monitors, Han Min leaned closer. Interesting. Chapter 3. Crimson Trials. Beneath the copper glow of a polluted sky, Luo Jian stood at the threshold of the Crimson Trial grounds, a training complex carved into the husk of an ancient beast, ribcage, its bones fossilized and laced with glowing veins of crimson ore. Here, the elite cadets of the Earth Federation honed their talents. This was no schoolyard. This was war's rehearsal. The instructor, General Mu Tianlei, a man whose presence stilled conversations and dried the air, walked before the line of cadets. His cybernetic eye scanned them with cold efficiency. "The Crimson Trials are not a test of strength," he growled, "but of will. You will fight, bleed, and possibly die, and only the worthy will step forward into the Federation's elite corps." Beside Luo Jian stood Wei Li, the sharp-witted tactician, and Fang Shun, who still bore the bruises from a bar fight that morning. Their breath fogged in the cold, artificial air. Luo Jian's fingers curled slightly, part nerves, part the subtle pulse of his spiritual core, responding to something in the air. Was it the bones of the beast, or was it something else? The trial began without ceremony. Drones descended from the high vaults above, transforming into monstrous metallic beasts, tiger lions with razor wings and sensor-enhanced precision. Each cadet had to defeat one. Luo Jian drew his saber. The world narrowed. He darted forward with near-perfect economy of movement, but this wasn't a contest of speed. His opponent adapted to his rhythm, countered his feints. He dropped to one knee, sliding under a pouncing drone, and in that instant he felt it again, that pulse in his soul. The strange energy he'd only begun to understand. With a roar, he unleashed it. Blue fire flared from his blade's edge. The drone exploded in a flash of shattered alloy and scorched ozone. A hush fell. Dozens of heads turned. General Mu narrowed his eye. "You're no ordinary cadet," he muttered. Later that night, in the barracks, Wei Li tossed him a canteen. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," Luo Jian said, "but I think I've just begun." He stared at his hand. His veins glowed faintly beneath the skin. Elsewhere, in a shadowed citadel orbiting Titan, a masked figure reviewed combat footage. He paused at the moment of blue fire. "Starborn," he whispered, and then he smiled. The hunt had begun. Chapter 4. Shadows of the Forgotten. The realm within the Crimson Trials was no ordinary battleground. It was a spiritual dimension carved from the remnants of an ancient war. Mountains floated upside down in a blood-red sky. The ground pulsed beneath Luo Jian's boots like a living creature, riddled with the echoes of countless souls who had perished here. Luo Jian's senses screamed the moment he entered. The gravity shifted erratically, pressing down 1 second, releasing the next. Whispers slithered through the air, voices not his own, promising power or torment. He reached for his saber. Something moved. A blur of bone-white claws lunged from the shadows, too fast, too silent. Luo Jian ducked just in time, slashing upward. His blade connected with flesh that dissolved into mist. "Night phantoms," he murmured. They came in packs, illusions that bled into reality. Each one reflected a fear, his fear. He saw his mother dying in a burning house. He saw his younger brother crumbling into dust. He saw himself on his knees before the very nobles who exiled him. His saber shook, his heart trembled, but the ember in his soul flared, and he roared, "I will not be broken!" The illusions shattered. Day by day, trial by trial, Luo Jian carved his way forward. His body bled, his soul strained, but his will only sharpened. In the 7th chamber he found a shrine. A sword hovered in its center, ancient, silent, and broken. Yet when he touched it, the shard pulsed with a familiar energy. The voice of the meteor soul echoed in his mind. "This blade once belonged to the star devourer. Now it is yours to mend." As he claimed the relic, fire licked across his skin, not pain, but evolution. Luo Jian emerged from the chamber, not whole, but more than he had been. The shadows feared him now, and outside the trial realm, dark eyes watched his progress with growing unease. The boy was not meant to rise this far. The storm was coming. Chapter 5. Storm-Forged Will. The air outside the Crimson Trial realm shimmered as Luo Jian stepped through the portal, steam rising from his skin. Though only a month had passed in the outer world, his body bore the evidence of years of battle within that twisted realm. His robes were in tatters, his saber chipped, but his eyes glowed with resolve. Waiting for him at the exit stood Elder Wen, one of the senior figures of the Heavenly Core sect, known for his stern gaze and colder judgment. Beside him were disciples Luo Jian had once trained with, many of whom had assumed his defeat. "He survived," someone whispered. "Not only survived," Elder Wen corrected, "he conquered." Luo Jian barely nodded, exhaustion threatening to collapse his knees. Yet the shard he held, the broken blade of the Star Devourer, thrummed with latent power. It had fused with his soul. In dreams it whispered, in battle it pulsed. He was escorted to the inner sanctum, where Master Kong Yi awaited. "You have touched the heart of the Crimson Trials," the Master said. "But power without purpose is wildfire. You must now be tempered." Tempering meant pain. In the Forge of Spirits, Luo Jian endured celestial lightning, soul-splitting chants and trial duels against inner sect prodigies. He lost often, bled more, but never quit. One such opponent was Shu Han, a golden-robed disciple favored by the elders. Shu saw Luo Jian as nothing more than a bastard upstart, unworthy of divine lineage. Their duel beneath the moon was vicious. Luo Jian's blade clashed against Shu Han's twin crescents, neither yielding. At the final moment, Luo Jian disarmed Shu with a reversed grip and laid the chipped edge of his sword at the other's throat. Breathing heavily, he declared, "I will never kneel again." The sect murmured. Luo Jian was no longer a shadow. They had to acknowledge him now. But the higher he rose, the darker the clouds gathered. Far beyond the sect's mountains, forces of a forgotten clan stirred. And in the imperial court, rumors spread of a star-born son who might challenge the throne itself. The storm had broken, and Luo Jian was at its heart. Chapter 6. Celestial Chains. Lightning cracked across the midnight sky as Luo Jian stood atop the pillar of heaven, the sect's highest peak. The stars above pulsed faintly, mirroring the rhythm of his breath. His body still bore wounds from the tempering, but something deeper had begun to stir. An awakening. The broken sword fragment, now bound to his spirit core, throbbed with energy whenever he meditated. But the sect elders, despite acknowledging his growth, grew uneasy. Power was feared as much as it was revered. Master Kong Yi summoned him once more. "You possess the legacy of the Star Devourer. That knowledge must be contained." Chains of celestial iron, forged from the heart of collapsed stars, were wrapped around his arms, not as punishment, but as a seal. "You will carry this burden," the master intoned, "until you prove your soul is greater than your might." Bound, Luo Jian was sent beyond the sect's walls, tasked with pacifying a growing rebellion in the border territories. Officially, it was a mission. In truth, it was exile. The world beyond the sect was harsher, colder. Villages razed by rogue cultivators. Children starved while nobles dined. Luo Jian witnessed suffering not born of monsters, but of men. In the town of Jiuluo, he crossed paths with a wandering healer named Mei Yun. Her eyes were sharp, her spirit unyielding. She recognized the celestial chains immediately. "You've been shackled by fear," she said, "not your own, but theirs." Together they drove out the corrupt magistrate, bleeding the town dry. Luo Jian fought with chained arms, every strike a storm, every breath a rebellion. The people called him Starbound Rebel. News spread. In the imperial capital, masked envoys whispered to the throne, "He bears the Star Devourer's might. Shall we act?" The emperor's eyes gleamed. "Let him rise. The higher he climbs, the clearer his fall." But in the shadows of the rebellion, another figure stirred. A youth with eyes of starlight, and a claim to the same legacy. The prophecy of the swallowed star had not spoken of one heir. It spoke of war, and Luo Jian had only begun to glimpse its fire. Chapter 7. Twin Shadows of the Star. The wind howled through the mountain pass as Luo Jian and Mei Yun left Jiuluo behind. The weight of the celestial chains seemed lighter with every step he took away from the sector's suffocating gaze. Though he remained bound in body, his spirit had begun to stir, untethered, seeking. By the third village they liberated, Luo Jian had become a myth. Children whispered tales of a warrior wrapped in stars. Elders offered him food and blessings. Mei Yun recorded the stories, her ink brush never resting. "Stories," she said, "are more powerful than swords." But the rebellion was not without cost. The imperial army, bolstered by cultivators from the Eastern Gale sect, moved in response. General Shun Han, a ruthless tactician with a vendetta against the Star Devourer's line, took personal command. Luo Jian's forces were ambushed at dusk near the Valley of Echoes. Blood soaked the soil. Mei Yun was struck by a poisoned dart. In desperation, Luo Jian unleashed a fragment of the sword's true power, rending 100 armored foes in a single breath. In the aftermath, a masked figure stepped from the smoke. He moved like Luo Jian, fought like him. But his eyes, they burned colder, darker. "I am Shu Tian," he said. "The other heir." Luo Jian could not speak. The prophecy's meaning, twins of fate, one to preserve, one to devour, etched itself into his mind. Shu Tian vanished before he could be stopped, but he left behind chaos. The army rooted, the villagers panicked, Mei Yun's life hanging by a thread. Desperate to save her, Luo Jian sought the Temple of Mirrors, an ancient ruin said to reflect one's truth. Within its depths, trials awaited, not of strength, but of will. He faced visions of his failure. The sect's betrayal, his parents' slaughter, Mei Yun dying in his arms, and the final trial, a duel against a mirror self who bore the face of Shu Tian. Emerging victorious, Luo Jian was granted a single tear of the moon lotus, a mythical remedy. Mei Yun stirred, alive but forever changed, her once sharp gaze now clouded with visions. "The twin paths are converging," she whispered. "Only one can reach the end." Luo Jian clenched his fists. The chains shimmered faintly, cracks forming in their links. His path was no longer just revenge or survival, it was destiny, and Shu Tian stood in his way. Chapter 8. Blade of Stars, Heart of Ash. In the northern steppes, far from the Empire's eye, Luo Jian and Mei Yun built their camp among ancient stones and whispering winds. The moon lotus had healed her wounds, but something deeper had been stirred. Mei Yun dreamt of futures yet to pass, of twin stars colliding in the heavens and a sword that could cleave fate. Luo Jian trained relentlessly. With each swing of his blade, the celestial chains weakened. Their cracks glowed brighter, and fragments fell like stardust into the soil. The blade of the star devourer hummed with latent hunger, eager to be whole. Rebels rallied to him, drawn by tales of a chain-bound warrior who defied sect and empire alike. They called themselves the Ashen Dawn, but word of Shu Tian's rise spread as well. He had carved a bloody path through the southern provinces, slaughtering both loyalists and rebels. Some whispered he had become the true heir of the Star Devourer, untainted by morality, pure in purpose. As the Ashen Dawn grew, Luo Jian faced new challenges, rival leaders who saw him as a threat, spies within their ranks, and visions, Mei Yun's warnings, of an approaching reckoning. One night, a cloaked envoy arrived from the Hidden Sky Pavilion, offering an alliance. Their condition that Luo Jian surrender the sword to be sealed forever. "I will not trade one prison for another," Luo Jian said. The envoy vanished in the night, leaving a single feathered arrow buried in their camp's heart. That arrow carried poison of a celestial kind. Half the camp fell ill. In desperation, Luo Jian used the sword's power again, drawing out the corruption. The act shattered another link in his chains, but left him weakened, trembling. "Each time you feed it," Mei Yun whispered, "it feeds on you." And then came the dream. A black sky filled with stars that bled fire. Two figures, Shu Tian and himself, locked in a spiral of blades. He woke to Mei Yun standing over him, eyes glowing. "The stars are aligning. You must choose what to become, savior or ender." Luo Jian gazed into the night sky. The stars shimmered, awaiting their reckoning. The blade pulsed. He would not falter. Chapter 9. The Dawn of Twin Blades. The morning sun broke over the northern mountains, casting a cold, pale light over the battlefield. The remnants of the Ashen Dawn sat in a hollowed-out encampment, the air heavy with tension. Luo Jian stood at the edge of the cliff, staring out into the distance. The winds seemed to whisper, carrying with them the echoes of an ancient prophecy, the rise of two blades, two fates, bound by blood and destiny. Beside him, Mei Yun's once vibrant eyes had dimmed, the visions she had seen growing darker with each passing day. She no longer spoke of hope, but of inevitable collapse, of the shadow of Shu Tian stretching ever closer. But Luo Jian refused to let despair take root in his heart. He was no longer just a boy bound by chains. He was the Star Devourer's true heir, the wielder of the celestial sword that had been forged to alter the very fabric of the heavens. The twin paths were converging. There was no way to outrun the collision. Word of Shu Tian's latest victory had reached them in the dead of night, a massacre of the Eastern Gale sect's strongest. The rumors spoke of an army of the dead, the shattered remnants of the ancient clans, now under Shu Tian's command. He was a force to be reckoned with, and his reach had stretched far beyond anything Luo Jian had anticipated. But Luo Jian had his own strength. The Ashen Dawn had grown strong under his leadership, and his reputation had spread throughout the land. Yet the weight of his own power began to feel like a burden. Each time he wielded the sword, each time he called upon its celestial might, another piece of his soul was consumed. It was not the kind of power that could be wielded carelessly. Every battle brought him closer to the edge of oblivion. "How long will we keep running from him?" Mei Yun asked softly, standing beside him. Luo Jian's lips tightened, his fingers tightening around the hilt of the sword. "We don't run," he said, his voice low but resolute. "We fight." A messenger arrived, breathless, with news of an impending attack. The Imperial forces were advancing once more, and with them a new weapon, one that had been forged specifically to defeat Luo Jian. The news chilled him to his core. His enemies had finally discovered his true weakness. The battle that followed was brutal. The Imperial army, bolstered by the Eastern cultivators, advanced with calculated precision. The battlefield became a hellscape. Bodies of both friend and foe scattered in the blood-soaked earth. Luo Jian's blade cleaved through his enemies, its celestial power wreaking havoc on anything that came near. But as the battle raged on, he began to feel the familiar burn within his chest, the price of the sword's power. And then he saw him, Shu Tian, the figure of his twin, standing atop a mountain of corpses, his cold eyes fixed on Luo Jian. The battle around them seemed to fade as their gazes locked. There was no need for words between them. This moment had been inevitable. "Brother," Shu Tian said, his voice carrying across the field like a knife through the air. "At last, we meet." Luo Jian's heart raced, his hands clenched around the hilt of his sword. The prophecy had spoken of a day like this, the day when the twin blades would clash. "You've killed so many," Luo Jian said, his voice a mix of anger and sorrow. "For what? Power? Revenge? This is not who we were meant to be." Shu Tian's laugh was hollow, devoid of emotion. "This is who I was always meant to be. The true heir of the Star Devourer. You were always just a weak shadow." Luo Jian raised his blade, the sword's power surging through him. "We'll see whose shadow is the strongest." The clash that followed was catastrophic. Their blades met with a force that sent shockwaves through the battlefield. Every strike from Luo Jian was met with Shu Tian's cold precision, the twin blades dancing through the air in a deadly ballet. The heavens themselves seemed to tremble at the force of their combat. But as the battle raged on, Luo Jian began to realize something. Shu Tian wasn't just his twin. He was the other half of his soul, the darkness that had been split from him. Everything that Luo Jian had fought for, his love for Mei Yun, his desire for freedom, his hope for redemption, was mirrored in Shu Tian's eyes. They were two halves of the same whole, two beings fated to destroy each other. The clash of their swords became an explosion of light, blinding all those who watched. And then, in the blink of an eye, Luo Jian's sword found its mark. But it wasn't Shu Tian who fell, it was Mei Yun. She stood between them, blood streaming down her chest, her eyes filled with the sorrow of 1,000 lifetimes. "Luo Jian," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No!" Luo Jian screamed, rushing to her side. "No, you can't!" But it was too late. Mei Yun's body slumped in his arms, her life fading away. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but not in the way they had hoped. Shu Tian's cold eyes softened just for a moment before he turned away. "This is the fate you chose," he said, his voice hollow. "One path leads to salvation, the other to destruction." Luo Jian fell to his knees, Mei Yun's lifeless body in his arms. His blade, once gleaming with celestial power, now felt heavy and cursed. He had lost everything, the woman he loved, his dream of freedom, and his very soul. And yet, the war was not over. The clash of the twin blades had only just begun. Chapter 10. The Silent Path of Stars. The battlefield had fallen silent. The clash of swords, the cries of warriors, the thunderous roar of the wind, all had ceased in the wake of Mei Yun's death. Luo Jian knelt at her side, his breath ragged, his heart shattered. The world seemed to close in around him, suffocating him with its weight. His mind spun, unable to comprehend the reality that had just unfolded before him. The woman he had loved, the one who had been his strength through every trial, was gone. Her body was still warm in his arms, but the light in her eyes had faded. The eternal flame that had once burned so brightly had been extinguished. She had given everything for him, for their love, and for a future that would never come. Luo Jian's hand trembled as he closed her eyes, his fingers lingering on her delicate face, memorizing the last traces of her beauty. A sense of emptiness overwhelmed him, a void deeper than any loss he had ever experienced. The weight of the sword he still held in his hand seemed unbearable, a reminder of the power he had once coveted and the price it had exacted. The sky overhead seemed to mourn with him, dark clouds gathering as if the heavens themselves wept for Mei Yun's passing. The stars that had once guided his path now felt distant, cold, and indifferent. But amid the overwhelming grief, something stirred deep within him. The anger that had been buried for so long, the rage that had simmered beneath the surface, now began to rise. Shu Tian's face flashed before him, cold, unfeeling, a reflection of everything he had once been. The twin path had reached its inevitable conclusion, but it had not ended in victory. Not for Luo Jian. The silent path of stars was his now, and the darkness that had overtaken his soul became his fuel. Mei Yun's death had not been in vain. He would not let it be. Shu Tian, Luo Jian whispered, his voice low but filled with deadly determination. You will pay. He stood, cradling the sword that had once been a gift, now a curse. The celestial blade was no longer just a weapon. It was a symbol of everything he had lost. But it was also his only means of redemption, his only chance at revenge. The world around him seemed to fade as he turned his gaze toward the horizon, where Shu Tian had disappeared, leaving nothing but chaos in his wake. The winds picked up, swirling around him, as if the very air conspired to remind him of the path that awaited. There was no more time for hesitation. He would hunt Shu Tian to the ends of the earth if he had to. He would destroy everything in his path, until the only thing left was the ruins of the twin fates that had been set in motion so long ago. Luo Jian's heart burned with vengeance as he walked away from the battlefield, his steps heavy but resolute. Mei Yun's death was not the end. It was the beginning of a new war, a war that would see him destroy his twin, and ultimately himself. The path of stars had already chosen him, and now it was up to him to see it through to the bitter end. Epilogue. The years passed, but the memory of Mei Yun remained etched into Luo Jian's soul. The blood of the battlefield stained his hands, and the weight of the sword that once symbolized his dreams now carried the burden of his endless war. He had hunted Shu Tian through countless lands, across mountains and seas, but his twin had proven elusive, his power growing with each passing year. Luo Jian's name became a legend, whispered in the darkest corners of the world. The man who once sought redemption was now a harbinger of destruction. The celestial blade was both his strength and his curse, its power taking a toll on his body and mind. And still, the search continued. But in the depths of his heart, Luo Jian knew the truth. The final battle would not be won with strength alone. The twin paths, so intricately intertwined, could not be unraveled by force. There would come a moment when the two would meet again, not as enemies, but as equals, as brothers, bound by fate, by blood, and by the choices they had made. And when that moment came, there would be no more running. There would be only the twin blades shining in the darkness, their fates sealed.